So welcome everybody. My name is Kumar. I am content team lead here at hireEZ, and thank you for joining us today for building an equitable workplace and LGBTQIAA plus hiring best practices with outbound recruiting. Outbound recruiting being a proactive mindset and approach to finding candidates instead of waiting for them to come to you. I'm personally very excited about today. I think the content team, when we put together webinars and sort of content in the past, it's usually product driven, data points, and really trying to sell you a solution. But I think today we're here for a very engaging and I think informative conversation that needs to be had. And I'm very excited that we have two professionals here today who are not only amazing experts in their fields, but active members of the LGBTQIAA plus community. I've had the pleasure of working with Reese pretty much every day. I think I've sent Reese more heart emojis than I have my family, like in the past week, just over the past year. And Katrina and I have Kat and I have gotten the opportunity to work indirectly as well. So it's exciting for me to just sit back and learn as much as I can, and I hope that everybody here who's attending is going to have the same experience. So without further ado, I will get out of the way and hand it over to Reese and Kat.
Who wants to go first? Do you want me to go first, Kat, or do you want to go
You're
first?
My host. Come on.
Okay,
Usually
fine.
I have to play circus ringleader.
Well, thank you so much, Kumar. I literally send you all the emojis like all the time, so I appreciate the love right back. Hi, everybody. My name is Reese. My pronouns are they, them. I am the events and inclusion coordinator here at hireEZ. Just like Kumar said, I'm a part of the marketing team / always help out on the content team. I'm super, y'all have no idea how excited I am for this. Kat and I have been friends for, like 2 years now, but feels like maybe an eternity. I think we're like those like soul people too. It's like I can always text them and be like, I feel this way, and they're like, oh my god, me too. And I'm like, okay, great, we're good. So I'm super excited to be talking with Kat, and so I'll pass the virtual mic to you, Kat, so you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so my name is Kat Kibben, and I want to be really clear that I am not a DEI expert. I won't pretend that I am. I am a job post writing expert. That is my specialty. And when I sit down to talk with Reese about topics like this, what we do is we talk about our life. That's what they were just referencing, is that we have these mutual experiences that are so unique because other people get to march through this world and they never even notice. And I think that's why we're here today, is to really talk about the things that sometimes we just never even notice. And I think truly, when we say ally, so often we forget that it's a verb, that we have to do work, that something has to happen, something has to be different. And so that's what I get to do every day, both through introducing people to my personal story, and in June, talking a lot about pronouns and belonging, which I always have the pleasure of sitting down with Reese to do at companies around the world. And I also spend, like I said, the majority of my time talking about job postings, because a few years ago, I had this theory that bias in job postings is not just linguistic. It's not just the words we use, because often that linguistic analysis creates more binaries that don't exist. And so what I've been able to do is actually look at the tactics that we use too, and they impact everyone around the world. And it's been pretty cool to be able to actually do work and not just say that I want to create more equitable workforces, because while I want to do that, I like to actually do something. And I think that's what we're here to talk about.
Perfect. We got a very exuberant yes, and I echo the same sentiment. Just to let everybody know, feel free to use the chat. So if you have questions, comments, exclamation marks, emojis that you want to send in, feel free to send them. I know Reese is our resident Zoom expert. So they will be monitoring the chat as well if questions come up, and I'll help guide the discussion as we go along. So we're ready to roll. Let's head on to our first topic. The first topic, common challenges that LGBTQIAA plus candidates face in today's job market. I think it's a great opportunity for both of you to discuss your experiences, your professional just journeys in general, and speak to sort of those areas.
I don't think we have enough time in an hour to like talk about it's like hard for, it's like people always laugh when I say that, but like for me personally, and I know Kat has also had similar experiences, like the biggest challenge is like my pronouns to everybody. I think that's the number one thing is, when I'm looking for a job, looking at, and kind of asking those hard questions too, like, what is your DEI ratio? Like how many folks of color do you have, or any like of the statistics? I think those are some of the common challenges that I found, especially with, I came out as non-binary 2 years ago. I identify as trans, I'm Black, I'm queer, all of this stuff is, trying to find that right role that's not going to just like, Reese, they're Black, they're also queer, check them off, they got a cat that lives in their background too. Like, I think it's all those things where, you know, for myself personally, like, I don't want to check a box. Like, I want to be hired for my role and everything like that, not just to make your like status quo be like your funny little picture on, you know, like your Pride Month. Is definitely one of the challenges that I've seen for myself personally.
Right. We know what it means when you add us to the invite for the company photo shoot. Okay. Like we caught on, you know, and truly, I think for me, it's this deeper question of belonging, right? I remember looking for jobs and really wondering if I could belong there and trying to like suss out the cues, anything that would make it so I didn't make another jump, end up at a company where it was bad for me. And so I specifically remember, if you've ever heard me speak before about job postings, you've heard the story about how I lost my job 3 days before I bought a house. And I want to give a little extra background that most people don't know is that I had moved to Nashville from Boston just a couple of weeks earlier. And so I went from Boston, which at least perceptively is a good place to be queer, right? It was the only place where you could be gay married at the time. And I am in Nashville, and immediately all my red flags go up because these companies, right, regionally, we are no longer aligned. I cannot make the assumption. And I remember having this person be very, very interested in me when they were doing, and so I did all of my research. I was a social media manager at the time. And I remember going on their Facebook and seeing this anti-gay donation that they had donated $500 to this staunchly anti-gay politician. And immediately I had to reassess. And mind you, my whole life was on the line, right? And so the thing that I'm not saying that people aren't allowed to post their opinions on Facebook. I don't want to be really clear about that. Like if you're listening to this, you're like, I have rights. Yes, you do. But you have to understand that one of the challenges we face is that we have to read so many subtle cues, not just to get a job, but literally to save our lives. Like that's what happens when we walk in a bathroom, we go, we're not safe here, right? This is our whole life. I don't want to have that experience when I go to work.
Yeah, and I will, sorry, I'm choking up on water. I will say too, like, I've been lucky enough for like any role that I've gone into, they're like, oh yeah, Reese, like we don't care. Like I remember my first job when I moved from the so not great state of Alabama and moved to Texas. I was like, oh, this is a little bit better, but also like, how do I show up as myself? Like I never knew that I could go from deep south of Alabama and show up for a job interview in a suit. Like it was never in my mind that I was like, oh, I can kind of like show up as who I am. And I remember when it came to my first job, I like walked in and everybody was like, oh, your suit's so nice, but like, you don't have to dress up here. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what Texas startups are like at all. And so for me, you know, even when I like got the job and everything like that, and people are like asking me like, oh, like Reese, like we would love to learn more about you and everything like that. They're like, oh, like, are you dating anybody? I was like, oh no, my ex-girlfriend and I broke up. There was no like qualm of them saying like, oh my God, you're gay. Tell me all about it. So when did you go? Like all of this stuff too, where it's, you know, sometimes when you go into different companies, it's always like, oh, they might be, they're the token gay. Like I've been lucky enough where I'm not the token gay. It's not the best. Everybody's like, oh, it's great to be the token gay. Take it from a gay. It's not that great. And so I think too, you know, talking about experiences and like, I always make it upfront and apparent when I'm like interviewing anywhere. I'm like, hi, this is how I show up. It was, when it comes to, I'm going to pause and like kind of answer this question. I've got my job in Austin, but altogether, Texas is all I have to say about it. Like
that experience might be unexpected in other
regions. Yeah. That's the thing too. And I appreciate you, Amber, for saying that too, because it's like, even though, you know, Austin is gay friendly and all this stuff, at the same time, there's certain areas and certain things that you just need to be like aware of, because like Texas itself is just Texas, but like, you know, sometimes in Austin, Dallas, Houston, like I'm always like leery. So that's also like a tip that I wanted to add to what you said, Kat.
Well, I love what you just pointed out, because I think it points out what I know people are here for, is the what I do now. And the thing that what Reese just illustrated, right? Putting on that suit. On your website, you can tell people how to dress for an interview. Part of equity, part of access that I think we do not talk about enough is access to information. Okay. Access to the knowledge of what you're supposed to wear and what's acceptable. And ultimately, what I think all of those add up to are what I call subtle cues. And the subtle cues that you can belong are a lot harder to do than putting that EEO statement on your website, right? That's what most people think creating, a queer friendly access to an LGBT candidate is like putting on, having the like rainbow picture at the bottom. And that's not actually what it is. It's about actually showing instead of telling. And so if we say these candidates, those candidates, me, we, right? Like this is representative of who I am. I think there's this perception that we're always looking for the subtle cues. And so what I would tell everyone who's listening is, I want to show you the subtle cues that told me I could belong. Show me, don't tell me. Like, I don't trust it, because by the way, we're all consumers of media too. And if you've learned anything over the last 3 years, it's don't trust what you read, right? That you need multiple sources. That is an important fact of being educated on something. And when we are making a life-altering decision, we have to be educated.
That's all I got to say to that. Like, there's nothing else I can like add to that, because they literally summed up everything of like the way that it is, for sure.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And we appreciate you sharing that. I think two questions immediately come to my head. One, when both of you have these shared experiences, and many of them unfortunate, is there a space where conversations can happen, whether it's between people with these shared experiences or even with the workplace? Like, how do you bring up sort of those challenges and make companies aware of them if they're not aware of them?
Do you want to take that one, Kat?
I mean, I think my first reaction is it's a lot harder than it sounds. I think about my friends who are non-binary, who are working at companies, and they have to tell their boss they don't want to come back to work because there's no bathroom for them. And that is not an easy conversation, right? It's not easy to look someone in the eye and be like, you didn't do it right. You didn't do it right for me, because their reaction is often, I did it. I tried. You should try harder, genuinely. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, that really happens every single day. And, I think as far as support systems, it's so critical and it's so special and valuable. And that's why Reese and I have such a good friendship in real life, is because you need somebody to talk to. And that's the value of whatever you want to call it, ERGs, ARGs. Right? Is that we do have someone to talk to, even if you've lived your whole life without ever meeting another queer person. And that's, these really rural groups, people who are based in Texas, not the Austin part, right? You can still be inclusive too by creating space where people can just see each other.
Yeah, I think like conversations like this too are like the only way that we can actually talk about it. Like, sure, Kat and I will text all the time, randomly about certain things that might have happened to them or happened to me. And, it makes me feel safe being able to be so vulnerable with them and telling them, because not all the time, say something happens with work, I don't have that like person I can go to. The only person that I kind of have is like, HR, but I'm not going to go that realm. I want to make sure that I like ERGs definitely help, but there has to be something else more that makes you feel more supported. Because sometimes when it comes to ERGs and ARGs, HR might be like around, kind of like having their float in. So it's not like you can be totally transparent and honest. So I think that's like also one of the things too, like, I'm lucky enough, and I know Kat's lucky enough to have a great support group of friends, because that's the way I can like talk about my experiences and everything like that.
That's awesome. And I also wanted to ask, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I also wanted to ask sort of about the evolution of those challenges. Have you guys seen the challenges be relatively the same over the past number of years, or, have those challenges evolved, gone away, have some new sprouted, or have they been relatively the same?
If you had asked me this a year ago when I was not out as a trans person, I would have a completely different answer for you. And I'm a little bit older than Reese. I'm going to age myself here. So I'll be 37 this year. And I was married. And I remember having to carry around a file that was this big so that I could have the equivalent of marriage rights at work. And I remember going to my manager and them being like, we don't cover same-sex benefits. I remember calling my bank and wanting to add my wife to my bank account, and they said no. And so all of that has changed on paper. Okay, like we've had legal changes, and we are currently teetering in a place where that might change itself. And I'm not going to discuss politics on that. And as a trans person, my life is still being legislated, right? I cannot begin to explain to you how much I did not want to come out. And the reason I came out, and most of you probably don't know this story unless you've followed along with me, is that I came out because of an awful healthcare experience. And healthcare is tied to work. And really what I realized, I'm an entrepreneur, and so I pay my oath in health insurance, but I realized that if I were in an HR setting and some healthcare provider said no to the way that I wanted my care to be provided, I would be relying on an HR person to say, you're going to cover that benefit. And truly, that's what's missing. That's what's not happening. That's where the inequity lies today is, yes, it's getting better for gay people, but we still have so many segments within this community that are truly not getting equal access to healthcare specifically. And that is tied to work, and that is the responsibility of HR teams to advocate.
Yeah, and to like add on to that, because it's kind of, they're not really the same, but like instances wise too, is like when the whole George Floyd murder and everything like that happened. That's when everybody was like, we need more people of color, we need DEI, we need all of this stuff too. Like the fact that like people are trying to make these impacts within like, I don't know, a month or so, it's not going to work. Like that's an organization I don't want to be a part of, because I know that this work that, Kat is doing themselves, other people that I know themselves, it takes time. Like having conversations like this, you'll get to learn more about Kat and myself, their story of coming out, my story of coming out too. And, trying to find my identity as a Black queer person in the space of what it was just 2 years ago. I would say that sure, things are changing, but we're not going to talk about politics on this because that'll be a whole other thing. But like the way that I see everything now too, is that sure, there's changes being made, but not in the best way for, trans folks, non-binary, anything like that, people of color. And I think that's like the scariest instance too, is that, 2 years ago, we had something that changed the world literally. And, people are still trying to get on top of that board and just be like, all right, this is what I need to do. When it comes to trans folks and everything like that, this has been happening since Stonewall, which was in, probably going to get the date wrong, and I'm going to be a really bad gay for this, but like 1976 or something like that, around that time. And, I think that's a super hard realization that not everybody has at the same time too.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing as always. And we do have one question from Shay. Shay, this is an awesome question that we'll actually save for our third topic, and we can unpack that more. But thank you again for sending the question. If anybody else has more questions, feel free to send them. I am going to move on to the next slide, if that's okay with you guys, or if there's anything else you wanted to add here.
The only thing I wanted to add is, and Sarat, if I'm saying your name wrong, you can yell at me later, but I want to address this. They had an issue with one of their potential employees. We couldn't provide the medical insurance for a domestic partner when we lost them. And often when the most common challenge is the thing that you think you provide for everyone doesn't apply to us. Okay. So and just a quick example, name change. So broadly, when I talk to companies, they have a policy in place for changing a last name. There's no policy for changing a first name. And that's just one example of a really common challenge for trans people that they experience all the time, where you already have a system in place, but your system is inequitable. And health insurance is another example.
Okay, pause. I have a question about that because I had no idea. Why is it that you can change your last name, but they don't care about the changing your first name? Because I mean, my real name is Therese, but like legally, my real name is still Reese Byrne. But I'm probably might make a change soon. But why does that? Like, why do companies run that way?
Yeah. So often your HRIS, your information system, is connected to taxation, payroll, et cetera. And you have a legal name and you have a name that you want to be referred to by, and there are not multiple fields for that content. And so they can't actually change it unless you go through the process of legally changing it, which means that, and I'll give an example from a trans friend of mine. He one of the most beautiful souls I know. He's so handsome and so like such a beautiful person, top salesperson in the entire recruiting agency globally. Every time they run the report, they dead name them because the report is not updated and they literally have no way to update it. It's that simple. But every person who gets married and changes their last name, it immediately updates. Yep.
This would I can go on about that, but I know we're trying to focus on it. But that's a whole other conversation we'll have to have. That's insane. I had no idea.
So the moral of the story is start with the systems that are inherently inequitable and work from there. You don't need to create some all new trans healthcare offering. Like that's not where we're going. That's not what we're looking for.
No, definitely. I think, is Reese frozen on your end as well? Okay. I think they just need a moment to process all that information that you got. But why don't we move on? Oh, Reese is back. Perfect. And so now that we've sort of talked about like the unfortunately long list of challenges that exist, what are some strategies that either both of you have seen implemented or you would like to see implemented for some of those common challenges that you've listed out, whether they be just from an awareness standpoint to actual policy being put into place and change enacted?
I'm gonna apologize. My computer just froze, and I was like sitting here, probably like, freaking out. So if anybody got a screenshot, it's okay. No idea.
I just told them that you were so taken aback by that whole issue that just froze.
Literally, I was like, "What?"
Processing.
Yeah. So when it comes to me and like kind of like seeing my outside of it, of visibility and inclusion, it's kind of I'm an advocate for ERGs and ARGs, but I also know that sometimes they're not the best practices with it as well too. I think for me, I want to go into a space where I feel included. Like I, don't be the corporate pride where you're going to change your logo for a month and then go back to the else or anything like that. I think there's certain ways that you can internally, become more inclusive, kind of like how Kat was saying when it comes to healthcare and everything like that. That's step number one, because that's something I had no idea about. And I'm just like, I can never imagine if I'm going into another company and being like, oh, hey, like I'm trans is what I'm trying to do. And they're like, oh, what's that? Like, no, we're not doing that. Like, that's one thing that I think that it comes to having systems in place where it makes you feel included and, making sure that this company can make you feel like you're in a forever home, technically. I think it's like baby steps into getting up to where it needs to be.
And I really think that you mentioned policy, and I've had a different perspective on policy before. And with this group, I will share that I've completely changed my mind. And I want to actually even just say that I think that's a caveat to everything we talk about today, is that I would just ask that you be open to changing your mind. And that when we're introducing new ideas, that you'll be willing to do something different forever, not just today. And so where I think most companies are, and I'm speaking this from someone who, I'll be on multiple Pride sessions today. I'll be on multiple this week, more than one per day. And what I'm finding is that there is not a baseline of education that's consistent in these companies. And so the first element is that you need to educate your team to create a baseline of education, right? And so they need to know what a pronoun is before you create some policy about it. They need to know why pronouns matter before we're having, revised introductions during interviews. Like, you don't get to have the rainbows all over your stuff until we educate people on what the LGBT acronym stands for. Okay. I mean, basics. We got to go back to basics. And from there, I really want to say that, and this is the mind shift, and I actually want to give credit to Reese's partner, Maddie, on this one, because Maddie, what she has done for me is taught me a lot about power. And power is part of visibility that we do not bring to light often enough. And when we mandate that people out themselves or pretend, what happens is we shift the power. We're telling people they have power even though they don't. We're saying it's safe for you to empower yourself even though it's not. And when we mandate pronouns on email signatures, while we have more visibility of pronouns, it is just a show, because if you don't know what they mean and you don't know why they're important to me, I don't want your pronouns there, because they are one of those subtle cues to me that I could belong here, and I don't want you to lie to my face.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, Kat and I talk about pronouns all the time, and I think for me, you know, putting them into place, say, okay, we're at Google. I don't know, I'm working some role at Google, and I always have my pronouns no matter where I am. And so me putting in my pronouns, and then, you know, maybe there's instances that happen where, you know, I get misidentified, even though it literally says my pronouns right here. I think there's certain ways that you can handle, you know, making sure that people don't mess up your pronouns, but also, you know, having those hard conversations, you know, with the boss, with the CEO, with anybody. You know, I think it comes to times where I want to make sure that I'm not like I never, anybody messes up my pronoun, I never correct them. And that's something that I've always do to myself. Whenever somebody says my wrong pronouns, to me, it feels like a bee is stabbing me in the chest. And I don't like bees. Like, that's how I've always felt. And I think, you know, having those advocates in the workspace of being like, oh, hey, their pronouns are there, that we're correcting somebody, is huge. We always talk about it, but when I changed my pronouns, Maddie's mom would like mess it up. And so I was like, we have a pronoun jar now. It's like it's a fake jar, but at the same time too, every single time she messes it up, I'm like, all right, Donna, you have to add like $2 in. Donna has messed up my pronouns, and I could probably own 2 Broncos, but at the same time, for her, she's working on it herself. I'm not mad that Donna might have messed up my pronouns the other day, even though we've known each other for 2 years. It doesn't bother me that her grandparents also mess up sometimes too. To me, as soon as they realize that they made the mistake and fix it, that means a lot more to me than anything. That doesn't feel like I'm having a bee stinging my chest or anything like that. That to me is like, okay, it's kind of like their muscle memory. Like, I played college softball. The way that I can get on base is hitting a ball really hard and running really fast. Like, I had that muscle memory every single day, and that helps. You know, sure, certain things when it comes to pronouns can make little changes here and there, like your email signature, like I've always had it there, or, you know, even on Slack, I've always had it, just because I want to make sure I'm showing up as myself. And I think it's really important that if there's ways that you want to help support other folks that have, you know, whatever pronoun they want to use or anything like that, and they're not preferred, just FYI, making sure that they feel included in it. And in instances, somebody were to mess it up, say something. It's kind of like, you know, when you see something, you're supposed to say something. Not everybody does that. Like, when it comes to pronouns, in my case, in my scenario, like, I know Kunwar would literally stand up and be like, they said that, don't even. Like, Kunwar would get upset for me, and that means so much to me as a person.
You just hit on exactly what I was thinking. It's like, I know I was socialized to be ashamed of who I love. I was socialized to be ashamed to be trans. That is deep transphobia that's in me, and I'm a trans person. So I know that it exists in everyone, right? And because we have this deep-seated shame, we rely on people to stand up for us. I think it's actually what makes the queer community so special, is this reliance on each other for our truth, and to trust others that they will defend and honor our truth. And in in our real lives, often that person is, you know, our partner or a parent, right? And I totally borrowed that. And now whenever I present, I show a misgendering cup and it says, and I tell people that they owe me $1 in my Venmo if they get my name. Yeah. If they get my pronouns wrong. And I'm always like, I don't have to work that's a joke because I wouldn't be working if I got that kind of money. Right. But in our work life, that role is played by our manager. And so it goes back to that power dynamic. The most powerful person for someone who's working is their manager. In theory, it's the person who can decide whether they're hired or fired. And so it is also the responsibility of a true ally, a true manager, if they are truly to lead, to build visibility and inclusivity on their team. It means that the manager stands out front, no matter their identity. So I feel very blessed to have a team of people that defend me equally. There is no power balance here where we take turns defending each other, but just like Reese, I'm far more likely to correct and defend on behalf of my team. And so for managers, I just want to guide you. The thing that I want you to do, and Reese, please share your opinion as well. But for me, what I teach managers is, if I am misgendered, if you're my manager and I'm misgendered in an environment where there is a off power dynamic, we are talking to a customer. We're talking to someone who is far more senior than me. We are talking to people who I am not equal to, at least based on your weird hierarchy of decision makers. I don't want you to out me, and I don't want you to correct them in real time. What I want you to do is follow up with me afterwards and say, when we are in a meeting, write this down, everybody. When we are in a meeting with someone who is, and you need to create a category, who we are selling to. When you're in a meeting with someone we are interviewing with, when we're in a meeting, put the exact context. How do you want me to handle it? That's one of the most powerful questions. If you truly want visibility and inclusivity on your team as a manager, how do you want me to handle it? Let me tell you, we operate forward from there.
So in instances, so there's two ways that I kind of see it. As Kat, how they describe it is how I see it in instances. There's also other instances for me too that I've said before. Say if we're just in a team meeting or anything like that, and say we're all on Zoom, we're all talking. I don't know, Sally, Joe, Beth. Hopefully nobody in this call their name is Sally, Joe, Beth, because I'm going to pick on you for a second. Basically say that they're referring to me as Reese, she was saying that. For me, if it's our team and nobody's outside of the company or anything like that, I would want my manager to be like, oh, you meant to say they, or something along the lines of oh, they meant to say that, or some small fix. What I don't really want you to do is be like, oh my God, we just messed up Reese's pronouns. Let's all talk about it. All it needs to be is 2 seconds oh, they said that. Cool, move on. That's all you need to do. You don't need to cry. I'm an emotional person. I cry all the time. But you don't need to cry and be super upset that you messed up my pronouns. I want you to at least acknowledge, but also make sure that my manager acknowledges in that moment that it's hey, quick fix, we're good to go. I also appreciate sometimes if you message me and we're on a call and you accidentally misgender me or use my wrong pronouns, say hey, Reese, so sorry, didn't mean to do that. I'm working on it. Cool. All right. That works out well for me. That, to me, that makes me know that you're trying to better yourself. Practicing, like I said before, is huge. I will say when I've been with coworkers, but not in in work, but also not at the office or anything like that too. I have been misgendered and I just sit back and nothing's been said. But for me, I'm not the strong voice. My partner, she won't get into a fight, but she'll say something, be they, and get mad about it because she knows that it makes me feel this certain way. So I think, kind of what you're saying, Kat, too, is at the end of the conversation, once I'm not around, that person that we're talking to, a client, then it come up to me and we can have a discussion. But when it comes to internally at work, we can fix it right there in the moment and move on. Is how I kind of view it as.
100%.
Do we want to go to that question or do you want to wait till the end, Kat?
Yeah,
I guess, moderator.
Completely up to you. I didn't know if you wanted to circle back to Orla or if you wanted to address that just towards the end. It's completely up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to address it now since we're on the topic. If they don't want to display their pronouns, tell them not to. Don't. Honestly, and I don't think you should mandate it. And full transparency, that is a shift in perspective for me. I really, for a long time, I'm like, do it. And I was even okay with people using pronouns what I would say is the pronoun that you want to be referred to as work at work, right? Versus the pronoun that you want to be referred to in your personal life. I felt like that was okay that you have two of them. And big picture, I think it is, because you have to decide if you want to out yourself, period. And I will never tell people they have to out themselves at work. That's your choice. And I'm not mandating pronouns because, again, it is a subtle cue and I don't want anybody lying to me. So do not mandate that. Mandate training, mandate education, mandate that they show up and they listen to somebody like me, someone like Reese, who can tell them about the real experience, because that's what changes people, not policy.
Yeah, I was about to say too, like, even if like you think it's like you might think it's a power move to make people have their pronouns. Like, I specifically have my pronouns because that's who I am. Anywhere I go, like, I'm sure I want to show up as who I am. I want to make sure that like everybody else feels comfortable. Like, I would feel awful if, say our manager was like, oh yeah, everybody has to have pronouns, but like somebody's like, oh well, I use different pronouns, now they're out. That is a whole other thing you do not want to touch or sting or anything, because that turns into a harder conversation to have. So I agree with Kat on that point.
The other thing I just want to add really quick is that if you do have pronouns in your email signature, one of the things I suggest is that you actually add a little section and say, this is why I shared that. Because we want to provide access for people to passively educate themselves, because most people aren't brave enough to ask the questions.
That's great. And I just wanted to shift to sort of the last, area of discussion that we had. Now that we talked about the challenges that exist and, increasing visibility, I think education is an extremely important piece of that. Where do companies go from there for finding and hiring professionals? What practices can they implement? What communities can they look to? I know Shay had a question about this that I can add in later, but I'd love to get your thoughts first before I interject there.
Kat's the expert, so this is them.
And you can speak to your own experiences about being hired as well.
Yep. And so one thing I am going to share in the chat really quick is an option for that education link, because I think that's something that could actually go into your email. That's a perfect example of the subtle cue, is where you say, my pronouns are, and then you say, and this is why I shared that. And so here's a free guide that can educate anybody on what a pronoun is, why they matter, how to use it in a sentence, whole deal, right? And so I'd say that's one really good example. Some of the other subtle cues that you mentioned regarding messaging, right? So maybe you say something like Happy Pride, right? During the month, you're allowed to celebrate things. You're allowed to mention that they're happening. One of the other subtle cues that I really like, and this isn't just messaging, but I guess it is a messaging feature, is how you introduce yourself. So the reason I know that often I'll get misgendered, even though it's in my name right here, is that I put they on my picture. Okay. And I showed up for a pronoun conversation and someone misgendered me in the intro. Okay. Like, I cannot explain to you how awry this conversation has gone. And so let's start at the introduction. Hi, my name is Aaron. In parentheses, he, him. I want to talk to you about this job because I think it's the next best job for you. Here's why, right? That's one of my favorite phrases to use, whether the person on the other side is queer or not. This is why I think this is the next best job for you. And I would also say that, like, one of my favorite subtle cues, and Reese, my friend Jessica. And so Jessica and I met because Jessica noticed a flag in my background. So why don't you think about your picture? And I'm not saying like rainbows everywhere. I'm talking a picture that's in your home where someone can see that little pride flag, where they can see that you're wearing a t-shirt, right? Subtle cues are just that. They're subtle. And like, obviously I can tell you to like, go to the HRC database and search that's fine, but that fits in the category of things that, and I hate this phrase, just to be very clear, diversity hire. That's diversity hire work. I want everyday work. That's what it means to actually find and hire someone like me, and for us to be happy is that we do everyday work, because my life is like this every single day.
Yeah, and I'm not changing the way that I am either. Like I'm okay. So full transparency, I'm in a bar stool right now because my cat son is sitting at my desk chair. So like usually I'm like lower. Okay, I'm not this tall. I wish. So for me, like on my desk, like you can see there's like a water bottle right here. I literally keep a picture of my partner and I that we took when we first met. Always, never changes, nothing. You can probably see once my cat son is alive. Sorry, he freaked out. He'll like be hanging up back here. Usually, what I do is I always have like little subtle hints. Like when I first met Kat, they had like I think it was just I don't think it was a trans flag, it was just a rainbow flag, and I was like, oh, I should have that too. Like you can usually I have a bracelet on that's like rainbow color too, and I love to talk with my hands, as you can already tell from 45 minutes in. But for me, I'm making sure that like we're jumping on a call. I'm showing up as who I am, even when I'm in my desk. Like you can see my partner right here. You can see I have lots of hats. You can see photos of Black women. You can see my closet. You can see my cat running around. Like all of this stuff is like whenever it comes to those in-person interviews or like first phone discussions, like I always show up as me. Like I always introduce myself like, hey, my name is Reese. My pronouns are they, them. Happy to have this conversation. Just like that. Like that's all I really do. I was lucky enough when I actually got this job, which was thanks to Kat. Shannon knew Kat for I can't remember how many years it's been, but Shannon was like, "Hey Reese, we'd love to know more about you." And I was like, "Hey, like my name is Reese. My pronouns are they them. This is my experience." And like Shannon, every single time is referred to me as who I am, which is using of the they them pronouns. Like it doesn't, she could be mad, she doesn't get that mad, but like anytime, no matter what, she will always use my right pronouns and show up that way. Since I changed my pronouns about 2 years ago, this has really been the only experience that I've had. I feel like for the last company I was at before with, I probably would have an issue, but at the same time, you also don't know. But I always make sure that like I'm showing up as who I can, because I'm not gonna put on my telephone voice from like 9 to 5. Like that's not, like I have a deep voice. Like that telephone voice is absolutely horrible. And so I want to make sure that like folks, if there's something that you get away from this too, is making sure that people feel comfortable interviewing with you or having little subtle hints like Kat was saying, so that they show up as who they are. And that's who you're going to get in the workplace most of the time.
Yeah, and I would even add, if you are looking for sourcing, I want to speak to the people who are looking for candidates who really want to find people. Great sourcers know this to be true, is that this is not a one and done thing. It's not one candidate. It's not one job, right? And so what I would really encourage, and something that even I encourage as a decent human, right, is that you follow people who represent the kind of talent that you're interested in hiring, and you openly educate yourself. You let them teach you. This is not a sourcing challenge, okay? Right? Like, I want you to go and follow people like Chase Strangio, who's a trans male leader of the ACLU and is currently advocating on behalf of he's at the Supreme Court, right? I want you to follow Alok, who is a non-binary poet who is writing about these issues, and hear their stories, because truly how you're going to make your messaging great, Shay, how all of you are going to make your messaging great, is by being highly empathetic humans. All right. I'm not teaching you anything special or new. It's funny that Aaron's sitting on this call, because I'm pretty sure Aaron was one of the first people that taught me that templates are just the beginning. Templates are infrastructure, but tailorization happens because we know people, we know what they care about.
I don't even know. I almost just froze again because I was like, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, and even too, like on my LinkedIn, like you can literally look me up. I show up as myself. It's not a professional photo of me. It's literally a picture of myself and a dog that Maddie's parents used to have that unfortunately passed away. Like that's how I show up as. My pronouns are also in there. I also have a rainbow flag in there. Like that's who I am. And so when it comes to, I mean, I don't know the outside world of looking at it, like I'm hiring for this, but those might be some things that you kind of look at, like, looked at their LinkedIn, look and see if they have their pronouns. Not everybody has them, obviously, or like has them out on their LinkedIn. But there's little cues that you can find all together that might help you find those candidates that you're looking for as well.
But please don't do the thing where we over exaggerate our commonalities in order for you to convey understanding. And let me just give one example, because I used to joke that there's only 3 things that people say if you come out to them. If this is this is a full joke, okay? Full joke, everyone. Sense of humor needs to be applied when I say these things, because I understand that it's coming from a good place. So the first thing they say is, I know somebody who's gay. My aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my this, my whatever. And you start building me some kind of gay family tree. The next thing that happens is that you tell me that you had interest in someone of the same sex at some point in your life. And we have a really awkward conversation about things that I don't need to know about you. And the third one is where you panic. You're like, oh God, they said the gay thing. We don't need to do that. You also don't need to force it, right? If you know something about someone, just show extra respect, right? Reese just shared, there's a lot of context cues. You get some subtle cues too. Show a little respect. And respect has a new definition in the year 2022. Sir and ma'am earn it.
Ooh. Yeah. And I think that's something I always get when when I first came out there, like, my cousin Shirley's gay too. Oh my God, y'all can be best friends. No, I don't. I'm good. Like, there's little things like that we don't need, because we experience it almost every single day. Like, coming out, when I first came out non-binary, it was a message that I was like, okay, but like, are you still a male or a female? And I was like, I'm non-binary. And they're like, but what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't need to tell you what that means. Like, I'm still like, sure, I'm happy to have a conversation. I'm happy to tell you my coming out story, but like, I don't need to tell you like the reasons why I decided to become non-binary. I feel comfortable enough for who I am that I'm happy to, my life is an open book. You can ask me from softball all the way till now. Not everybody's like that either too. So always make sure you kind of like take that and respect that too. Because not everybody, I didn't have a great coming out story. Kat, I can't remember if they had a great coming out story or not too. Not everybody has that rainbow and butterflies where like Maddie, my partner, she came home with a girl and her parents didn't bat an eye. They're like, all right, cool. Like me, it was a whole other thing. And so I think that's also something really important to talk about too, and realize that like, we don't want to date you. I mean, you're probably great, but like, we don't, like, I'm happily in a relationship. Like, that's something that we don't need to talk about anymore. Like, it doesn't need to be like so Reese told me that they're gay, I think they like me. It doesn't work like that. Like, yes, I'm a lesbian, but like, give us like a couple of days, like, and maybe some coffee to talk about that.
Yeah, that's a whole other webinar. Hit me with that next question.
So Reese, I don't have a chance, right? Is what you're saying, basically.
Okay, so Kunwar.
I'm just messing around with you.
Look, in maybe another lifetime, we have chopstick too, since there's an inside joke with the chopstick thing.
That's right. I'm still gonna send you a heart after this. It's fine.
Oh, same.
No, but again, thank you both for sharing it. Are there any other questions or comments in the chat? I just want to say also thank you so much to the chat for being engaged in this conversation as well. Just gonna keep an eye out. But oh my God.
I would say if there's anything that you can take away from this is that like these conversations are always should happen within internal organizations. Like, there's always something that you can learn if you want to become, better ally, you want to, do better somehow, some way. Like, conversations like this are always great to have. They're not always, light and fluffy. There's always some dark sides to it too. But these are like super important to have anytime.
Yeah, because education plants seeds inside of people, right? We get the chance to change people's whole lives. We get to give them jobs that literally change everything for them. And people say that's a corny reason to be in TA and like you shouldn't be in it if that's why. But I actually completely disagree. But I feel like we actually have to take a step back and give ourselves even more credit, because what we do is when we build safe places, when people like you show up for conversations like this and you educate yourself, what we do is we create momentum around the world that we actually want to see. And when we do that, we make people better humans. We have that power, right? Because if they're happier at work, they're making enough money to pay their bills, they're not so stressed. It means they can have a little bit of extra energy to play with their kid that night. It means they show up before dark. It means that they are kinder when their partner comes out as non-binary because they have a base understanding. They know how to love their kid a little bit more. And that's the thing that I find, and I feel very, very blessed to experience over and over again when I'm doing this speaking about pronouns and doing this education, is that people come back to me and it's not about how they treat the people that are next to them. It's not about the professionals they're sourcing on the internet. It's actually moms. And as someone who did not have a good coming out, this is extra healing and extra special to me, but it's moms who come and say, I understand my child for the first time. It's the parent, the sister who comes and says to me, I really wanted to ask my sister how to refer to them, but I didn't know how. And I've spent the last 3 years feeling awkward around someone I love so much. And when we are better at home, we're better everywhere. Our lives are better. And that's the important part. So to me, I just want to pause and say thank you to every person who showed up here, because you're creating a world in which a kid like me could really thrive.
Not me getting emotional with all of that. I told you I get emotional, but that's literally what Kat said is how I feel too. Even though I didn't have the best coming out, but now my sister's working on my pronouns and everything like that. She's always been supportive, but she'll say weird sentences, and I was you can just refer to me as me. That means so much to me. Y'all showing up and being here, wanting to learn and hearing, about Kat's experience, my experience itself too. It takes a lot for us to talk about it. It is always hard. There's always parts when I always talk about my coming out that I go into a dark space. Having conversations like this make me feel lighter and brighter, because I know, maybe you'll take something out of this. Maybe you'll take me saying a pronoun jar, or maybe me saying that I'm not going to date you and you're really upset. You're taking something so small out of this and learning and, teaching and doing something with your organization, but with yourself personally, that makes my job so much easier. I know it makes Kat's job easier too, because you're showing up to learn and to be here, and it honestly means a lot.
Yeah, and I echo those same sentiments. I mean, thank you both so much, especially for sharing some of the vulnerabilities, the stories, and just so much. I mean, I think it means a lot to both me and everybody in the chat. And I also wanted to thank the chat for being so respectful and so interactive during this discussion. I hope you were able to take something away, just like Reese said, basically paraphrasing, because you both nailed it. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Shay, I don't know if you could see Shay's comment, but she said, thank you so much for, this has been so great, so insightful. Thank you. The show just don't tell concept is a big takeaway for me. I definitely want to continue to think about how I can do that as a recruiter and how we can do that as an organization. And I think the comments are coming in. So again, thank you both so much. Much love to everyone here. And yeah, we'll be in contact soon. I think we'll be sending out an email with the recording of this. And if there are any resources that Kat or Reese provide, I will make sure to include them in that email. And I'll also make sure to include their LinkedIn so that way you can connect with them. And if there's anything at all that you need to reach out about, my name is Kumar, content team lead. If there's any questions you have about hireEZ or anything that was discussed today, and obviously, again, we'll link back to Kat and Reese. But thank you so much for joining, Kat, Reese. Thank you 1,000 times over. And
thanks, Kumar.
Yeah, of course. And we will all be in contact soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.